Hello everyone, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm doing the Got Freedom podcast video here. The Got Freedom podcast with Chad Hummel. We're live in front of the Monroe County office building at 39 West Main Street. The purpose of being down here today is Shannon Joy, a local radio host, was confronted by the Fairport Police and the Monroe County Sheriff's Department back in March over a contact tracing issue. Today she announces a lawsuit that she has filed against the Monroe County Department of Health, the Fairport Police Department, and the Monroe County Sheriffs. And she's doing a press release today with her lawyers out of Buffalo. And we're gonna follow this event today. We might break this up into multiple videos, so bear with me. Right now we are outside. Pretty soon we're gonna be going inside. There's lots of press here right now, lots of followers. I'm gonna try to turn this around. I don't even know how to. Forgive me. Well, I'll just turn my phone around, I guess. Actually, hold on. Here we go. You can see the press is here. You can see all the supporters here. There's a couple dozen people here. There's Shannon. We're gonna be going inside the county office building here momentarily. Shannon will be speaking along with her lawyers, Corey Hogan from Hogan and Willig. So we're just gonna kind of follow everyone in here. And what I'm gonna do today is just kind of narrate this. Again, we're downtown Rochester, New York, live at the county office building. Momentarily, Shannon Joy, along with her lawyers, Hogan and Willig, Corey Hogan out of Buffalo. You may recognize that name. Corey Hogan out of Buffalo is the attorney who challenged Governor Cuomo's mandates when he redlined bars and restaurants all over Western New York. Essentially what he did was he closed certain restaurants based on his COVID statistics. There was literally situations where restaurants on one side of the road were shut down and restaurants on the other side of the road were allowed to remain open. So Corey Hogan has agreed to take this case on for Shannon Joy. She is suing the Monroe County Department of Health, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, and the Fairport Police Department over a contact tracing issue where the police came right to her home. So we're gonna go inside the Monroe County office building here, and in a few minutes, Shannon's gonna speak along with her lawyers. So we're gonna go on in. Maskless, of course. These are all of Shannon's supporters here. We are Facebook Live. How you doing,
What's
sir?
up, my friend?
We're going into the Monroe County office building here.
What time does your plane come in?
Beautiful building, by the way. Look at the architecture, the marble, the brass. Somewhere in this building right now are a couple of the individuals who are getting sued as part of this lawsuit. Here are the dozens of supporters that have shown up here today. A tremendous group of people, patriots. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. If somebody can chime in and let me know that they can hear me okay, that would be great. Hi, Don. I think Don's here. So I'm going to turn this back around. Shannon's going to, actually, we're good here. So we have Shannon Joy on the left, and that's her attorney, Corey Hogan, on the right. We have members of the press here. And I'm just going to be quiet now. And hopefully you'll be able to hear Shannon. Again, we are live on We the People Podcast Network here with Shannon Joy in the Monroe County office building, where she's getting ready to speak regarding her lawsuit. Her attorney, Corey Hogan, on the right. Her supporters behind her and members of the press.
All right, thank you so much for coming today. My name is Shannon Joy. This is Corey Hogan of Hogan Willig Attorneys at Law. watching cartoons in our front living room when a stranger walked onto the front porch of our Fairport home and began aggressively banging on the front door. Frightened, she looked out the window and saw 2 armed police officers on the sidewalk and a second stranger on our private property. When she didn't answer the front door, they walked around the side of our porch and banged aggressively on the side door, frightening our 9-year-old son, Teddy, who was playing video games in the playroom. Alarmed and scared, my daughter ran upstairs to find her dad. "Daddy, there are strange men on the front porch and I'm afraid." My husband, Jeff, quickly dressed and ran downstairs to find 2 Monroe County health officials, 2 armed police officers, and by then, 4 vigilant neighbors who were concerned about the incident unfolding at our peaceful village home. What was our alleged crime? What offense had we committed against the county to justify sending armed police and government agents to our home to frighten our children and disrupt our quiet neighborhood on the Saturday morning before Easter? It turns out that Mimi's crime was being my daughter, and Jeff's crime was being my husband. And my crime was defending and protecting my daughter, who had been ensnared in a contact tracing investigation, falsely accused of being in contact with an individual who had tested positive for COVID-19, and unjustifiably ordered into quarantine. My crime was exercising my First Amendment rights by exposing the bully tactics and corrupt methods deployed by Monroe County health officials on my radio program the night before. You see, the night before this incident, these agents were deployed to harass my family at our home. On my radio show, on News Radio Wham 1180, I played a 15-minute recording of my conversation with Jean Mac Fogg, a senior-level contact tracer who reports directly to Mike Mendoza. And in that conversation, I, along with attorney and friend Chad Hummel, exposed the agency's methods of intimidation, their incompetence regarding contact tracing investigations, and most importantly, the county's very obvious and blatant violations of basic constitutional protections. 14 hours later, in what was clearly an attempt at retaliation and intimidation, they deployed agents and officers to my home. I did my job as a mother, protecting and defending my daughter, and also as a member of the press by scrutinizing and challenging individuals in positions of power. There is nothing controversial about the media asking tough questions and exposing corruption within government institutions. But under this current leadership, any media criticism is unacceptable and will result in harassment and intimidation. To my knowledge, in the 15 months since the onset of COVID-19, never has the county personally delivered a quarantine order. And never have they sent armed police to accompany contact tracers to an individual's home. Yet they did that to me 14 hours after they were exposed on my radio program. I suppose their intent was to scare me off or to frighten me so that I would shut up and let them continue to bully individuals and members of this community in perpetuity and in darkness. And if I'm being completely honest, they did scare me. They were probably the scariest hours of my life, those moments when I realized how vindictive the county was. That they were so vindictive they would send armed police officers to my home. And what went through my mind was the question about what would they do next? If we violate these quarantine orders, will they get a family court judge to sign a warrant and take my children? It was a terrifying moment for me as a mother, and I'm sure that this would be a terrifying moment for any parent. We shouldn't be afraid of our government. It's not right. They terrified me because I realized how vindictive they were. We were so scared that even though Mimi tested negative for COVID-19, we locked the entire family down on Easter weekend, canceling all of our plans, and through the next week because I was afraid they would take my daughter. But I want to be courageous. And courage is standing up even when you are scared. And you all know me. Even though I'm frightened, I won't back down from bullies. I will stand up to them, and that's why we're here today. In Monroe County, in a pattern that has become untenable and unacceptable under the leadership of Adam Bello and Mike Mendoza, the health department has operated without scrutiny, transparency, or accountability. In matters of public health, which is purposely broad and undefined, they have granted themselves powers beyond their jurisdiction, the power to investigate individuals without cause, to access personal and private medical information, to order individuals into home imprisonment for weeks without due process, to shut down schools and businesses arbitrarily and harass citizens with intrusive and unnecessary regulations. And most disturbing, the power to use police force and brute tactics to intimidate members of the press into silence. This is not the behavior of public servants. This is the behavior of tyrants and despots. Any society challenged with crisis must necessarily seek to balance the rights of the individuals with the needs of the community. Governments cannot be allowed to declare perma emergencies and then use that as an excuse to trample over the little guys. Not in America. And the reality is that even though we are enjoying a brief summer respite from lockdown, we all know that whether it's beta, delta, gamma, or even a bad flu season, the next variant, virus, or hyped up health emergency will be used to strip us of even more of our rights until we have none. They will never stop until we stop them. And one way to stop them is to sue them, to make it financially difficult for them to persist in their disregard of individual rights. Because of my media platform and the extraordinary events that took place on April 3rd, I have a unique opportunity to use what happened to my family as a springboard to fight on your behalf. And I know I'm not alone. The indignity that I suffered has paled in comparison to the anguish and torment that so many of you have suffered, particularly those who have watched their loved ones perish tragically and unnecessarily alone in county nursing homes. Children who have had their lives ripped away struggling with anxiety, depression, and even suicide. Many of these are government-inflicted casualties, and though we cannot address these things in this lawsuit, we can use it to hold these officials accountable for their disregard of our rights and our lives. Today, everything changes. Today marks the beginning of a larger movement in New York State and across the country where we come together and stand up and say no more. Today we put government officials on notice. We will not lie down and surrender our liberties. We will fight them in the courts. We will fight them legislatively. We will fundraise, organize, and petition for freedom. We will demonstrate in the streets. We will unionize parents to protect our children in schools and healthcare workers to protect our medical freedom. We will challenge police departments who allow their officers to be used as tools to enforce unconstitutional health mandates, forcing them to violate their oath to protect the Constitution. We will demand justice for those who died in nursing homes, and we will hold accountable the people who hurt them. And we will never, never, never give up. I am so thankful and blessed to be joined by Corey Hogan of Hogan Willig Attorneys at Law, who has successfully defended hundreds of litigants in New York State since March of 2020 from those who seek to deny them their basic, God-given natural rights. He has fought and won on behalf of hair salons and restaurants, including our dear friend Don Schwartz of Veneto's. He has fought and won on behalf of children in the reopening of youth hockey programs statewide. He is currently fighting to get the masks off our children's beautiful faces permanently in public schools. Much of the work that Corey does is as a philanthropist and a crusader for liberty, a role I'm sure he never expected to play, but one that is of vital importance in the state and across the country. With Corey's help, on Friday, June 25th, we officially filed a notice of claim to inform Mike Mendoza, Monroe County, the Monroe County Department of Health, and the Fairport Police Department of our intention to file a civil rights lawsuit in federal court for the torturous harassment of my family and broad constitutional violations.
Nice.
In addition, I am establishing the SJ Legal Fund, which will serve as a funding mechanism for this lawsuit and hopefully many more to come. Individuals will be able to support our legal efforts with donations at that site. At this time, I would like to introduce you to Corey Hogan to tell you a little bit more about the nature of this lawsuit. Thank you.
So as we all stand here roughly about 245 years ago. It was a day, July 4th of 1776, when people said to themselves, not everybody, when people said to themselves, we've had enough, we want to live our own lives, free from interference from the government when it's not necessary. So fast forward, the pandemic. Now it's hard to find, in my mind, much good about it. It has taught us real quickly what happens when government seizes almost untouchable, uncontrolled power. You see it going on all over the world. Not in Rochester alone, not in Monroe County, not in New York State, not the United States. Throughout the world, there have been lockdowns and there are continued lockdowns. Today, you can't drive across from Buffalo to Peace Bridge to go to Canada. There's one instance after another. The number of people that I have talked to whose parent, spouse died in a hospital or a nursing home alone because the government said you cannot go in and hold their hand is ridiculous. So what we are doing is this. When we talk about lawsuits, our law firm was the first law firm to be deemed what they called an essential business back in March of 2020. In theory, that was to allow us to continue to operate. How mistaken I was when that occurred, because shortly after we were given that designation, the Attorney General of the state of New York made it their practice to call my office every day. They wanted to know, why are you continuing to work in your office? You can do whatever you're doing at home. We are going to position people outside your office in unmarked vehicles, taking down license plates of people going into your office. So that's in US of A in Amherst, New York, a year ago. Taking down plate numbers of people who dare to go to a business and do their normal day-to-day activities. So in theory, we have a constitution that says, you know what? We can't trust anybody that we give unlimited power to. Power does corrupt. It's just the way it is. So we have this legislative branch that did not exist in the state of New York since the emergency powers were given to Governor Cuomo. They did nothing. No legislation of any kind, no legislature of any party did one damn thing. Nor did the ACLU, supposedly out there to protect our civil liberties. They have done nothing. So what we really need at the end of the day are the Shannon Joys of the world.
Yeah.
To be the focus of attention 24/7, to have children exposed to media, to have a husband who works a job exposed, and to wherever you go, be subject to somebody taking crack shots at you. She's willing to do that. We need rabble-rousers in this country. That is what the Declaration of Independence talked about. You want to talk about past heroes, whether it's Benjamin Franklin or George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, right through the list. This is where it came from. They're no different than Shannon Joy saying, I've had enough, I'm going to get people behind me and we're going to do something about it. It makes absolutely no sense for four government officials to come unannounced in a private residential neighborhood, knock on the door with marked police vehicles, to basically hand an order of quarantine for 10 days to a 12-year-old girl because she played volleyball with perhaps a person that may have had COVID. So they come there for no other purpose but to intimidate, to say, you're not going to have a right to speak up. We don't want people criticizing what we do. The government wants to operate unimpeded and do whatever they want. And if it's not up to if the citizens don't do something about it, they will do it. And whether it's a lockdown for COVID-19 or a flu virus or whatever it is, Everybody across this world has been subjected to government lockdowns. We can't take care of the world, but we can probably take care of Monroe County, maybe the state of New York, and maybe this government. So we are going to be bringing a couple of actions. One, a civil rights action saying that you can't do these things without due process of law. As it turned out, her daughter tested negative. I asked her to go get a test. She was negative. Because at the end of the day, as it turns out, in the world, there are about, at this point, 6 million deaths from COVID. Every year, 9 million people die of hunger. Every year, about 4 million children die of hunger. So while we're not shouting out about COVID being some kind of a frivolous thing, the issue is, does it justify the restrictions that are imposed upon mankind everywhere in every corner? It's our position that it doesn't. The forgotten victims, you're going to find out when this gets sorted out, are our kids.
Yes.
Our 4-year-olds to 18-year-olds from pre-K up through senior year in high school, who, if they're going to summer school today, are still wearing masks. Even though it's clear that 50% of this population has already been double shotted, and the other half, 60% of that has already natural immunity, and we have herd immunity everywhere. If they're making these kids put a mask on when they go to school, and it's one thing if you want to do so voluntarily, but to take a 5-year-old and for a year and a half or 2 years, put a mask on her and say, this is how you're going to behave for 7 or 8 hours, is unconscionable and wrong, and the government should not be able to do these things in this country. It is the wrong thing. So Shannon has said, from my perspective, please help, let's do something about it, because if we don't, I don't know who will. So that's what we're going to be doing. So in addition to what Shannon is doing with respect to the overreaching of Mr. Mendoza and his health department, is we will be bringing actions to get those masks off those kids. Another thing we did when we represented restaurants, they were all shut down. They were going out of business left and right. We brought an action with this purpose. Judge, please let them stay open. If people want to go, let them go. They're going to impose appropriate sanitation regimens within the restaurant. If people don't want to go, they don't have to go. Across the state, they were shut down. Governor Cuomo, who gets a regular paycheck every week, didn't really give a shit. We brought the action. We were successful in getting an Erie County judge to say, I'm going to open up the restaurants. You're not going to shut them down any longer. And at that point, the next day, the governor of New York and our Erie County executive, Mark Poloncarz, said, we are going to open the restaurants. And so they opened up across the state because of a bunch of little restaurants in Buffalo, New York. So, that takes that step forward and does something about it. It is really true. It is that one individual that finds it in his or her heart gut to go forward when most people don't even see it or don't have the energy to do it. So this is what's going to take place here, and she needs her support, everybody's support, because it's not only important in terms of dollars and cents, and we are way in the red on this stuff, but also in terms of the momentum. It's important that you get press coverage, because the word should get out to society. It's important that people are backing her, and you do what you can do to make your voice heard. It's only when that all occurs will there be a good, decent chance of success. So please listen to Shannon going forward. You can certainly hear about this lawsuit that we're filing. And your support is invaluable in reaching out to every single person. And maybe together, we can bring this country back to where it once was. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone who wants to support this effort, I have set up a donate button on my website, theshannonjoy.com. It is for the SJ Legal Fund. Every penny will go to, I mean, like we said, they're already in the red on this. They've done a lot of pro bono work, but we want to file these actions as much as we can. There is no better attorney in New York State to do this. There is no more winning attorney and firm in New York State to do this. We will be good stewards of those donations. We promise you all that. Are there any questions?
Is this going to be filed in Monroe County, or is this going to be filed somewhere else?
We're going to have the choices of either bringing it in Monroe County in your state court or in your federal court. It will be filed in this jurisdiction in Monroe County, yes.
So what do we do when the judge doesn't want to take our case?
Well, we're going to file it probably in federal court and in state court. And we've had some good success in Monroe County with a couple of your judges, where they allowed, for example, a restaurant to open up when the SLA shut them down. Just took their license off the wall without asking any questions. The judge said, none of that, let the restaurant get back open. So it hasn't been all blue. It's not easy. The odds are typically going to be against us. But at this point, we also are hoping that if we get our information correct, we get the information out there, that we'll get a judge to listen. It does seem sometimes overwhelming. Is it really worth the effort? But to do nothing that's not an alternative that we can accept. I mean, I've got 3 young daughters. I don't want to leave them in a country where they don't know what they're going to do when they get up because the government's going to tell them how to run their day.
Anyone else?
Is there a class action that we can get in on?
It won't be a class action. That will take too long. But there will be an action where a number of individuals. We brought the restaurant case. We had about 100 restaurants. So people are interested in doing, with respect to the parents now in the face mask, over in Buffalo, we've got about 250 parents that are part of it. We set up a not-for-profit, they become part of that organization, and we bring the action on their behalf. Because if you're not 18, you can't bring an action in your own name anyway. So there's ways we can get you in front of the judge.
Can others still join class action lawsuit with the parents?
Absolutely. We filed one already on an administrative basis saying that the way they did it with the health department, the way they implemented these emergency rules, there was no basis for that. So we filed that immediately. We are now putting together a federal lawsuit talking about the actual efficacy of the match. Do they work? I mean, my understanding is if they're in the best case scenario, they're no more than 40% effective. Most kids have no symptoms. As far as the number of kids that have died in this country, it's about 30 out of about 600,000 in this country.
More died from the vaccine.
The JAMA report too.
So there's no good reason to keep masks on these kids. And we've got to get them off because we talked to a lot of doctors, speech therapists, psychologists. The damage that's being done is very, very severe and significant. No one can see that. So the government lets it go on. Like, oh, it's not my problem. It's not my problem. But it's going to be a lot of it's emotional. So we have to do something to stop that from going on. We've got a lot of distraught parents.
Where do they go to join contact you?
You can get on either our website at hoganwillig.com or you can talk to the Minner.
Call the office 716-636-7600. I know there's someone, Darlene, Aaron, somebody there.
Constantly I'm hearing from people thinking of doing it, but not getting done.
Yeah.
Vicki?
For the school boards, do they have any jurisdiction or authority in getting the masks on these children?
Brought a lawsuit against 2 superintendents, one in Clarence and one in Lancaster. And then also there was one in Orchard Park and Williamsville where the action was brought against the superintendents. They had written letters to the Department of Health saying this is not good for a kid. But when the lawsuit was brought, for whatever reason, they said, well, the state is making us do this, which I don't believe is true. Most of the judges said, we're going to let the superintendents do what they want. One judge allowed the school to be open if they wore shields. but we need to get the masks off completely. Shields do not work. But they're about 2% effective. It's just a thing put in place to impose some kind of rule because they don't know what to do.
Is there any class action suits or any suits against Cuomo?
Well, the state of New York is a defendant in all of our actions, and he is named as the governor.
Okay.
So he's part of the defense.
Are you part of it? Are you part of those suits?
You know, we've got a number of suits going on already right now.
Okay. So they can contact you about any type of suit they're thinking.
If it's, we will look at anything, the Attorney General as well, whatever our office.
I think it's about 17 actions against the governor since school has started.
17, really? It just takes so long.
Is there anything about not mandating vaccines for kids to be able to attend school in the fall?
Yeah, that's a good point. The vaccine was basically authorized under an emergency mandate, a federal law that basically said the only way it can be administered is if anybody out there has an absolute right to not take it. So otherwise, it's not going to be authorized. So it's emergency basis, you have a right to say no. They are now turning this into something where they're taking that right away from you. If they say you can't go to class, you can't go to school, you can't go to your employer says you can't go in, I am having a hard time understanding how that works. If it ever does get complete authorization, it'll be a more difficult case. But right now, they should not be able to require people to get vaccinated.
It's coercion.
It's too new. They don't know the long-term impact. There are vaccine ports that exist because of the fact that they know with any vaccine, there are going to be some damages. So these people have a right to go to a particular kind of port for them. But that's actually after vaccines have gone through the approval process that is usually somewhere between 4 and 8 years. There's nothing that authorizes quickly. So whether it's good or bad, I don't know. The whole idea is to give people the choice. That's all we want.
Mr. Hogan, Chad Hummel, thank you for being here. 2 questions. One, do you have any other plaintiffs that are currently involved in Shannon's lawsuit? And the second question is, what sort of legal relief are you seeking in her lawsuit?
Well, Shannon is the one that brings the action on behalf of her daughter. Her daughter's 2 months, she's 12. So she's the plaintiff. You know, she's the one, her family's the one that suffered the injury, so she's the one that's bringing it. We have filed what they call a notice of claim, just because if you're bringing a claim against a municipality or a subdivision, and if you're asking for monetary damages, then you have to file what they call a notice of claim. You do not have to do so if you are bringing a civil rights claim, which is in addition to what we will be bringing. We are going to say that the government doesn't have a right to basically write a little note and say, you've got to stay in your house for 10 days. They've got to have a legitimate basis to do so. You don't restrict a human being that way without having a legitimate, articulable basis. I'll tell you one thing. In September and October and November of last year, there was contact tracing going on. And it was all being accumulated. And then Governor Cuomo had a press conference, I think December 11th. He had a big chart up. And he said, here is what's going on. Here's the science. I think it was like 600,000 points, or 60,000, some crazy number where they traced the COVID. And they said at the end of the day, in terms of our restaurants, viral transmission, less than 1%. Schools, less than 1%. 74% from the home. Because the virus is almost impossible to get outside. It's just too hard to get it. You have to almost spit in somebody's face outside to get it. But if you're sitting in a home where there's generally poor ventilation and you're there for hours, that's how it gets transmitted. So locking people down in their home is the dumbest thing the government could have done.
Based on the data.
Against them every time we're in front of a judge. And the government stopped giving out the information. They are now fighting us to prevent them from showing the information they have that supposedly is scientifically based about the viral transmission of the COVID virus. They won't let the public see it. that is totally wrong to keep that information from the public, because the government is supposedly out there to help and provide for it. That when they start doing that kind of stuff, that is not what this government should be doing in this country. You don't keep public information from the public. It's theirs to see.
Can all the harassment calls be part of that lawsuit that you got? I mean, I think it was like 3-4 days of calls constantly.
Yeah, I was harassed by contact
You know,
tracers.
the whole story will be able to come out.
Yeah, you'll hear everything.
And hopefully it'll be in front of a jury of her peers. We'll make a determination whether her civil rights and the civil rights of her daughter were violated by their governmental behavior.
I think we have about 12 jurors right here we could use.
Shannon, how are you and your family holding up during this whole stressful situation?
So it was interesting when they finally left, the contact tracers and the police, and walked in the house with my husband. And the first thing my daughter said to me was, "Mommy, are they going to arrest me?" And so that was hard to hear as a mother. It is hard to imagine or articulate the fear that goes through a mom at the prospect of them taking your child, realizing that they could come and take your child. So that has, my family is resilient, I'm resilient, we are fine, but that feeling does not leave. That doesn't ever go away. This idea of it's a breach of trust, it's a violation of privacy. It was humiliating on my street, quiet street. I don't have as much as a parking ticket. I haven't had one in 20 years. We are peaceful, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, and to have that type of intrusion is something that will never, ever go away. But,
You know Shannon's mom, and I never see Shannon afraid. But the day she called and said she was afraid about them taking her child away, I saw Shannon. I saw you go quiet. She went quiet. It was the thing that she told me about that was horrible for her. Okay, so don't let this happen to your kids. Don't let this happen to parents. Don't let it happen, because this could spread like wildfire. So I'm sorry.
that's okay, Mom.
Do you think the state was telling you to be by going after you and saying, "Hi, I gave you
So you've heard for about an hour now from Shannon. Hold on one second, I'm just going to back up here. So Shannon has spoken for about an hour now. You've heard from her attorney, Corey Hogan, from Hogan and Willig in Buffalo. As you heard, Hogan and Willig is a law firm in Buffalo that has already successfully litigated several lawsuits against New York State and local county governments in both Erie County and Monroe County over restaurant shutdowns. Shannon Joy filed a notice of claim last week against the Monroe County Department of Health, the County of Monroe, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, and the Fairport Police Department for essentially sending the police to her home to harass and intimidate her family over a simple contact tracing matter. The theory behind the lawsuit is that what led up to the contact tracing event where the police showed up at her house is that Friday night, the night before they showed up at her house, Shannon went live on her radio program with yours truly, and we exposed the contact tracing debacles that were going on in Monroe County. Shannon had recorded her conversation with the lead contact tracer in Monroe County, and she played that recording live on the radio on Wham 1180, and we spoke extensively about it. And the next morning, not a coincidence for sure, the next morning the Monroe County Sheriff's Department and the Fairport Police Department showed up at Shannon's home. I'm just gonna, give me a second here, I'm gonna back down the stairs. The one thing that I learned today is the We the People Podcast Network needs to buy me one of those thingamajiggers that you can hold up the phone with. My arms got really tired holding up my phone for an hour straight. So I'm going to ask the powers to be at the We the People Podcast Network to get me one of those things where I can hold my phone up. So I'm gonna jump off here pretty soon. Thank you for joining me. This is the Got Freedom Podcast with Chad Hummel. Thank you for coming downtown with me today. Again, we broadcasted live here at 39 West Main Street, the Monroe County office building, to hear from Shannon Joy and Corey Hogan from Hogan and Willig regarding her lawsuit. She filed the notice of claim against Monroe County and the police department, and what that means is in due time she will be filing a formal lawsuit against those entities to prosecute those entities for harassment, essentially. So Chad Hummel again signing off from the Got Freedom Podcast on the We the People Podcast Network. Go America.